So one of the big problems that we've got at the moment is that the care system is a ticking time bomb. The care system as it is currently is at the point at which once the current generation of boomers enter the care service in large numbers, because it is a gigantic cohort, much bigger than the previous cohort who are currently in care, we're going to face an even bigger care crisis that we have currently. We just don't have enough space. We don't have enough people working in care. We just don't have enough capacity in the care service, both in terms of staffing and in terms of actual facilities. And the amount of people in care is only going to grow, not just as the population ages, but there's a very specific problem with the fact that boomers are a gigantic demographic that are all going to go into using the care sector very, very quickly. Now, what this requires to be able to sort this is having a national care service. What we can't do is just have this position where every boomer who managed to get like extra property wealth has to sell it to pay for care, and people who don't have all this extra property wealth because they're working class just don't get access to the care that they need, and the price of care will go through the roof, as that's how supply and demand works. So we need a national care service, which has been on the Labour manifestos at the previous few elections. It's had a pretty strong support amongst the Labour membership. I've been a really large advocate, but it's been in the NPF document. It's been one of the really strong, like, state-led policies that's been actually in a lot of the NPF documentation moving forward. So I actually had reservations on my criticisms of Labour, given that they were committed towards a national care service. However, just like every single promise that you ever get from Sir Keir Starmer, it'll get broken eventually, right? Silly me, chat, for expecting the Labour Party of 2023 to stick to something that it had promised previously, because we now have the information that Labour are to omit funding of social care reform from manifesto and scale back its Lord's plans. So not one U-turn, chat. Oh no, not one U-turn. This is 2 U-turns for the price of one. One article, 2 U-turns. We love to see the Liberals in chat just deny, or on Twitter I guess, will just deny that they have indeed U-turned on this stuff. And then we'll point out to them explicitly that it has been indeed been U-turned on. And then they will change their position and say, oh, well, actually, it's really important that he U-turns on this specifically, because the U-turn is just what is necessary to win the election, and so the cycle continues. And this is a really big one, because the National Care Service is an incredibly important policy, given the demographic trends I was speaking to you about before. So I'm pretty tough, to say the least, that these particular plans have been dumped. And on top of that, we're losing their plans for Lords reform, which was also super important, right? Because the House of Lords is an unelected chamber, it is anti-democracy. We do not want to have an anti-democratic lever on power in this country, and Lords should be reformed to have something a bit more proportional than the current first-past-the-post system we have in the Commons. It's also not going to get adhered to, even though it was passed by the Labour membership at conference every single time. They always do. And even the unions had moved on PR, but the leadership have not. And the thing about Lords reform is just a constitutional amendment. It can be passed, and it doesn't cost you anything, right? You may say, oh, we need to scale back the social care plans because we've not got enough money, right? Which, of course, isn't true. That's not how countries which have sovereign currencies work, right? But even if you go by that framework, even if your only solution to your policy platform is just getting rid of things because you can't afford them, Lords reform is basically free. It's going to cost some administration, but it's not a huge amount of cost to administer, especially over a 5-year term between now and the next election, which I assume some level of democratic involvement in the second house would have its first chance to actually get meted out, would be at the next election. But no, apparently they have to scale back the Lords reform, and apparently the reasoning for this is to make the election offer to voters bomb-proof. When who is going to not vote Labour because they're promising a national care service? Are the British population so fully attached to the House of Lords, considering how the name of the House of Lords has been dragged through the mud over this last year, considering Boris Johnson's appointees, his scandalous appointees? People had no reason, no possible justification for being appointed to the House of Lords in the first place. And then afterwards, Liz Truss getting appointees to the House of Lords, even though she was only there for 44 bloody days. Incredible, literally incredible, for them to just dump this stuff, which is not popular, and then give a silly reason as to why they're dumping it. Or it's not credible to stand on a platform of an incredibly important problem of demographic aging being sorted by a national care service, and also on top of that, having plans for constitutional reform, which lots of people are in favour of. None of this makes any sense, but I guess I'll read on to see what they're saying here. Labour is preparing to omit details of how to fund a reformed social care system from its next election manifesto, scale back its plan for the House of Lords reform during the first year of office, and recalibrate the way it presents a $28 billion a year green prosperity plan, which has actually been scaled back already to $20 billion. So this is a scale back on a scale back, on top of 2 U-turns we've got here going, chat. So it's a pretty jam-packed announcement, this one, as it pledges to prepare to bomb-proof its offer to voters before polling day. After a successful conference in Liverpool last week, which resulted in the party extending its lead in the poll over the Tories, shadow cabinet ministers are now turning their minds to the precise shape of manifesto for an election next May or October. Senior figures said the focus would be on producing an offer that was affordable in a difficult financial climate, nonsense, as well as being credible and deliverable, which House of Lords reform clearly is. And where does that fit in that statement that's been made there? The Observer understands that Starmer's party will avoid laying out a detailed plan of reform for social care and the politically nightmarish issue of how to fund it, because it fears any proposals will be torpedoed by the Tories in the heat of a campaign. Yeah, of course, trying to make the rich pay their fair share so that we can care for our elderly. You know, the ones who usually vote Tory or trying to win, the ones who would be the ones who would actually be saving money with the National Care Service, right? I'm happy, right? To adhere to a social contract where I'm like, look, I was happy to pay into a national care service for old people now under the proviso that same care will be shown to me later. But of course, can't guarantee anything with this country anymore. Happy to rip up the future for future generations, just continue over and over and over again. Because that's how neoliberal brain poison works. That all social contracts must be ripped up and be replaced with rugged individualism where no one can care for anybody and people only think about themselves and their own generation and their own immediate future. But nevertheless, I digress. The idea that would somehow be a target for them, say, I can't believe that Labour are promising to do all of these things that are good that people want. Like, what are they going to attack you on? But I guess he must have, as Brugulus points out in chat, clearly they must have gone to a focus group and got negative responses from a very tiny subsection of the public, and are making sweeping changes on policy to make up for it. On top of all other sweeping changes, all of the U-turns, all of the rollbacks, all of the climb downs, all of the flip-flops, over and over and over and over and over again. On top of the fact that one of the pledges was upholding humanitarianism on an international scale. That's pledge fallen by the wayside, hasn't it, recently? Pretty important pledge, just completely evaporated. On top of policies evaporating, not even policies that he pledged in the leadership election, policies that they've spoken about between then and now that have been in the NPF document, the one agreed on by the Labour Party, that's now also being rolled back to. I'm at my wit's end. I really am at my wit's end. According to senior party figures, Keir Starmer's team, while committed to social care reform, do not want to offer Tories a target or invite them to attack the plan to make claims about the tax implications. Instead, there'll be a general commitment to make changes when in office. Oh, there's a general commitment. There's a general commitment, chat. Don't you feel reassured that they have a general commitment? Just like their aspiration for new social housing that basically has a rubber stamp of "if you build it, they will come" written on it. Just field of dreams policy, as I was mentioning in my housing video I released a couple of days ago, where they're just, okay, we'll get round to it at some point. I'm pretty sure people will be much happier voting for an actual concrete policy proposal with concrete funding proposals and how they're going to deliver it, rather than just, we'll get round to sorting it at some point. Nonsense. This is nonsense. This is complete nonsense. It's almost like they actually don't want to do it, and they're watering it down because that's their actual ideological position, isn't it, chat? Weird, that, isn't it? Strange how all of these pledges, all of these promises, all of these policies just get climbed down on for no reason, no electoral reason, no justifiable electoral reason. But it's almost like that's what they actually believed in the first place, and all of the pledges were just lies initially. In 2010, Labour's plans for funding social care were branded a death tax by the Tories, and hit the party's vote badly, while in 2017, Theresa May's Conservative campaign suffered irreparable damage with accusations she was planning a dementia tax. Then just don't tax old people, tax rich people. You're giving them something back for their tax money. The problem about the other taxation was because it was not done in a fair and progressive manner. As long as you tax progressively, as long as you say, well, actually, look, we're going to impose a wealth tax, we're going to increase capital gains taxes, we're going to keep working people's taxes low, the people actually going to need the social care, because rich people with enough wealth that they're getting wealth taxed are not going to be the ones who are using the National Care Service. Tax those fuckers. Tax the rich. They're getting away with bloody murder in the tax system at the moment. Why are they getting away with it? The wealth disparity is huge. If you really care about funding your proposals for day-to-day spending, which this is, to be fair, wouldn't fit within the fiscal rules to use fiscal expansion to be able to do this kind of spending. If you want to show that you're credible on having it funded, then just tax the rich. But of course, they don't want to do that because guess who's donating to the party right now? That's strange, that, isn't it? What a coincidence! What a coinkydink! What a conundrum, right? What a snafu they seem to have got themselves in. We need to give ourselves cover to do reform in the manifesto without giving the Tories a target to attack us. We can't allow the issue to dominate a campaign again. In his speech to the Labour conference, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting said there was no solution to the crisis in the NHS that doesn't include a plan for social care. The merely repeated promises to create a national care service that would guarantee better pay and conditions for carers and aim to address recruitment and retention problems. The thing as well is that if your worry is they'll attack you for a death tax, for example, then don't say what's funding, right? Don't say what's funding it. Just say we have a wealth tax that's going to deal with our day-to-day extra spending that we promised from, right? Or an increase in capital gains for extra day-to-day spending. There's a bunch of fiscal expansion for like our infrastructure commitments, but anything that we say that's going to be for some kind of day-to-day spending program is just covered. It's covered by the wealth tax, and then they can't link it specifically to what your social care reforms are. In a speech to the Labour conference, Shadow Health Secretary Stress Wheating said there was no solution to the crisis in the NHS that doesn't include a plan for social care, which is true, but merely repeated promises to create a national care service that would guarantee better pay and conditions for carers and aim to address recruitment and retention problems. Inevitably, experts and organisations that have been pushing for social care reform for decades and which have been dismayed by endless delays by successive governments are disappointed that Labour is not coming forward with more detailed ideas. And surely as well, Mike, surely, if you're the time period where you wanted to be able to push through a policy that you thought was difficult, that you thought was hard to sell to the public, would be the time when you're literally 20 points ahead. They are the meme. They are literally 20 points ahead. Let's see the emotes in chat. They're 20 points ahead. They don't have to just continually hide behind poor policy of fear of losing the election. You're so far ahead, you can take a couple of risks. I would think risks on things like council housing, social care, and things like that are super important for things like cost of living crises, etc., would be the kind of things that you would want to take somewhat of a risk on, given that the public already know these things do need to happen eventually. Sally Warren, the director of the policy at the King's Fund Health Policy think tank, said, "We need to see much more detail about what both parties will do to ensure that the hundreds of thousands of people who rely on social care will get the care and the support they need. The Conservatives are previously committed to introducing a new cap on care costs and making the means test more generous, but already having delayed implementation once until after the election, they need to confirm that they intend to see that policy fully funded and delivered and won't continue to kick the can down the road. I wonder whether they'll do that or not." Labour has so far focused on their social care policy thinking on growing and supporting the workforce, a vital area that does need attention. Because again, that's what's making the care expensive. However, they can't continue to remain silent on the vexed question of how to pay for the social care we need in society, how to improve the quality and availability of the care, and crucially how to share the cost of social care between the family and the state. Tax the rich. Just tax the rich. Just tax the rich. How many times do we have to say it? Several Labour sources have also made clear that previous pledges by Starmer and his team to abolish the House of Lords and replace it with a fully elected second chamber will no longer be a first-term commitment. So that's another pledge you can strike off your books, chat. Instead, in its first years of power, the party would focus on other legislative priorities such as its New Deal for working people that would ban zero-hours contracts and end qualifying periods for basic rights such as sick pay and parental leave, because of course you cannot legislate for two bills at the same time. Less than a year ago, Starmer and his team appears committed to moving towards a fully elected second chamber in the first term. Now, several shadow cabinet sources said there was a recognition this would cause huge constitutional upheaval and take up too much parliamentary time. Now, that's just nonsense. And that's just nonsense. These aren't debated on the same day. Instead, Labour senior figures say Labour would look at a more limited set of changes, such as capping the number of peers, increasing the powers of the body that oversees appointments to prevent inappropriate people being given peerages, and possibly get rid of the 90 or so remaining hereditary peers in a first term. So just, again, the same kind of tinkering and bollocking around with the current failing system that every party has done for 30 years at this point, of just tinkering with a failing system and expecting that to produce excellent results. I'm at my wit's end, chat. I'm really at my wit's end. I'm so sorry. The Speaker of the House has cautioned against moving too far too fast. Of course, the Speaker of the House of Lords has. Spoken in favour of more incremental change. These warnings are understood to have been taken on board. Because, of course, the Lords don't have any personal material interest in continuing the existence of said House. With the Tories in ever deeper dismay, the economic outlook gloomy, Starmer and his team have seemed increasingly determined to rein back in on big-ticket policy ideas. This is the time when you can do them. The Tories are literally in the toilet. They have incinerated their next election campaign. You don't need to try and convince the public that you're going to be moderate when the Tories have already failed miserably. You have the platform, you have the ability, you have the lead, you have the leverage to be radical, to be bold, to have big policy. And you're taking this one opportunity that you have and then you're flushing it down the toilet. You're getting rid of it. You're incinerating it, right? If it was a close election, maybe I could at least buy that position. I could at least take that position in earnest. If the electoral calculus on this one was pretty close and there was only certain movements each way, where you didn't want to have one policy that tipped people over the edge or could be attacked. But that's not the case at the moment. At the moment, you're 20 points ahead. You're 20 points ahead. You have no reason to be cautious. The people are crying out for so much change. You're delivering them very, very, very little. And people will only get more disillusioned with politics if they are expecting change and they do not get it. Even if this leaves them open to charges that they lack vision and reforming zeal. Shadow ministers say they've been asked to submit ideas for next manifesto to a new Star Chamber, chaired by Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth, definitely not related to anybody who deliberately tanked any election campaigns, to check that they are credible, affordable and bomb-proof. Party officials in Liverpool were determined to avoid talk of radicalism and boldness for fear it would be interpreted as a sign of financial ill-discipline. Financial ill-discipline is not when you don't spend money, it's when you spend money badly. This continual conflation of spending money being fiscal profligacy, like de facto, rather than spending money badly being fiscal profligacy, which is literally what we've had, right, for the past 13 years, spending money badly, pumping money into the financial sector, right? Austerity for everybody else. People don't want austerity. People are sick of austerity. People do not want our public services collapsing. Like the idea that as Crooked Q points out in chat, that being bold is not a desired trait for political leaders. This is ridiculous to me. The thing is, the eye-catching policies announced in this bit here talk about a pledge to build 1.5 million homes, and they won't even have state money for it. They're just expecting the private sector to build those homes. They're not even pledging to build them themselves. They're pledging that they're just going to magic them out of thin air by just allowing the private sector to be able to do it and just hoping, fingers crossed, please build. This is fantasy politics. An aim to promote a sense of responsibility and excitement. Jesus. It's all about being seen as the grown-ups. Chat, why? Why do they do this to me so often? Why must they do this to me? Why must they call having shitty policy being a grown-up? Why? The only people obsessed with being seen as grown-ups are children. Literally the only people obsessed with being seen as grown-ups are children. It's pathetic. It really is pathetic policy making. After Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, that's what the public wants. The only thing that tanked Boris Johnson was the scandal, the Chris Pincher scandal, Partygate. He was still polling super highly up until those points, even after all of the things that happened. Because people wanted hospitals, they wanted levelling up, they wanted benefits being risen with inflation. They wanted these things, which were state spending, state projects, that Boris Johnson wanted to deliver to them. He was a perfect package for what they wanted from economic policy. The idea that people disliking Boris Johnson is disliking the fact that he had strong economic policy ideas, when actually people dislike him because the guy himself was an absolute clown. But he wasn't a clown because his policies made him look like one. He was a clown because he acted like one. Which, to be fair, if anyone on the front bench at the moment looks like a clown, it's bloody Jonathan Ashworth. Remember him on Question Time? He was rubbish. How is anyone voting for Jonathan? I just don't get it. I just don't get it. There was also intense debate in the party about how to present its key policy pledge to drive economic revival, deliver lower energy bills and meet green targets through a green prosperity plan, which has already been trimmed back earlier this year, with Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves saying it would spend 28 billion a year, not immediately, but would ramp up towards the figure. In Liverpool, sources also defended themselves against Tory attacks that the plan would mean excessive borrowing, while pointing out that 10 billion a year of the 28 billion was already being spent by the government, meaning only 18 billion would have to be found. So again, remember what I said before about scaling down the projects. And it's not excessive if it's being invested in capital investment. That's what all governments do. They all have strategic, fiscal expansionary investments on infrastructure to drive economic growth. That's how proper economics works. It's how it's always worked. And again, this consistent consent manufacturing to try and see this as being fiscal profligacy is just so categorically untrue. It makes me want to go full Sudoku, it really does. Some shadow ministers also want the word green dropped from the plan, and to label Labour's prosperity plan to boost investment and jobs, because party polling about its green messaging has not been positive. And you're literally being attacked by people who are trying to take the anti-green message. Surely you want to be able to market yourself as the antidote to the party of the motorists. But again, I guess I'm voting for the Green Party anyway, so people who do care about green stuff are going to vote for our not party. Some Labour MPs and frontbenchers fear the lack of radicalism and tendency towards caution could backfire. You think? One frontbencher said, "I see what they're trying to do, but there is a danger there that the electorate don't give us any credit for being so cautious and simply think we have nothing at all to say," which is true. They don't have anything to say. And the problem is, right, is that it may, right, being sensible and cautious and not looking like you're going over the top or being too radical or bold, right? That might win you one election. But when people have been promised national renewal and you don't deliver it, what are they going to do in 5 years' time? What are they going to do at the next election? What are you going to do long-term on policy? What's going to happen when people feel disillusioned with politics? What's going to happen when there's no left-wing alternative and people will find other political positions to be able to take in response? When the red teams start failing, like the supposed left party that's not even that left-wing, start losing, start looking like that they failed, they're going to go to the far right. The demise of class politics only pushed the far right further, as it did do in the latter Blair years. We've all seen where this is going. We all know how the script works. So this is not just an issue with getting elected now. There are long-term consequences to this lack of boldness and this lack of vision and this lack of radical policy. It's not just that you fail people now, because you will do that, but the failure of people now will lead to further electoral and ideological consequences down the line as well. Mark my words. Be warned, Labour. I'm warning you now. Yeah, you. To ensure that any of this failure that we get 5 years down the line, you own it, because you will have failed. And I will not be the one saying I told you so. I mean, I obviously will, but even so. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.